I was wondering when the old Ike Turner was going to show up. Child, let's get into the shenanigans of part 2. Ready to love, make a move. Hey, y'all. We back for part 2 of the Ready to Love, Make a Move reunion. Welcome. If it's your first time, come and have a seat. We're going to have some fun up in here. And in Question Crew, you know how I get down, so let's get right into it. First of all, honey, tell me, why did this episode open up like it was an overview scene of a Tubi movie? When I tell you the background gave every movie they shoot in Detroit. Will Packer, what is you doing, baby? This is New Orleans. So, of course, when we invited back to the couch, honey, we are still in the throes of Sharice and all of her 10,000 issues. And we're still arguing down this factor from last week of Sharice saying that the girls did not have her back and she felt ganged up on. So we go back into this childhood trauma, child. And I will say, although I am annoyed with Sharice going damn near into her 50s with this same issue unaddressed, I appreciate that they took a moment to, I guess, show what can happen with childhood trauma and essentially how, as an adult, you could still walk into your life years and years and years later and still be holding on to stuff from when you were a kid that makes up how you interact with people in your full-on adult life. Now, what I have a problem with is the fact that Sharice is damn near mid-40s and still not addressing this issue, mama, because nobody in your classroom is here right now. So, she's going back and forth about, let her speak. And, she's trying to say that she didn't feel like they had her back. And Ashley's getting upset and animated and really could calm her ass down too. Luckily, Venetia does come in and tries to give some light to the situation because Tamika's sitting there completely confused, honey, and probably cold. And they're having this conversation about, the fact that Sharice experienced bullying in her life very young. And as a result, she said she won't be bullied no more. So she showed up in every situation, ready to go at it with anybody that was going to come to her. And while I understand having that defense mechanism in place because those type of things can scar you and you don't want to be bullied in your adult life, coming on this show and expecting any man or any other person to put up with that constantly, ZADIA, we also talking to you, sis, is not okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the important part about when they talk about the ready to love part. Come fully healed to a certain degree. It's nothing perfect, but we don't want to see all of these constant triggers with you. Don't show up in these issues the way we asking these men to not show up with their clownery, because we're going to see it later, honey. Don't also show up completely unhealed from those types of situations because your future partner does not deserve that. So we take a pause for the cause. They give Sharice a chance to reset herself. And we come back on the scene, honey. And it's Ashley's turn. We're here to focus on her love story and what happened with her this season. So first up, we got the right side and the left side situation going on. We go right side, left sided. And on the left side of things, we have, ZADIA, Sharice, and Venetia, who have moved on that side of the couch because Ashley's going to sit next to her picks. And next to them is that funky old friend that showed up for Donald's situation. I know that girl got a name, but I didn't care to recognize it because I also did not care to remember it because she is annoying. And sure enough, she dressed there in her New York and Company best, honey. It's very much giving, I bought the last suit on the last sale on the day before they closed in the mall. And being corny as ever because, again, the inappropriate energy is still all up and through. You could just see it. Now, on the right side of the couch, we got Ashley, we got Donald, then we go, Ike Turner, honey. And so I have to say, I really love Donald's suit. He was well dressed. He's sitting in that posture of, third grader in class. He don't ever sit up like a straight grown man, honey. I don't know what be going on there. Ashley still dressed in that outfit, and Bitter Man is sitting over there looking like he just came from a Jimi Hendrix fire sale. And so they're starting to have this conversation about how Ashley's journey went and, how she met Donald early on and she connected with him really fast. And they had a very positive situation in the earlier throes of things. And, there's panning around the camera to both sides of the couch. And, Miss Velveteen on the other side is getting so, missed every time they bring up Donald and Ashley's instant connection. They start talking about the fact that Ashley really took to him, and early on it was a very positive situation until they had like a crux when it came to their communication. And at that point, it opened up the window for Kirsten to come in. And of course, Kirsten is sitting over there stewing, honey, in his J's, trying to figure out why he did on this couch. Or at least that's what he tells us. So they had this quick conversation. Donald says, yes, there was instant chemistry. Ashley says that she was instantly attracted to Donald. And, it was only when the communication issue happened that, things started to go awry for them. And it was an instant connection. You could also tell that Donald wasn't really comfortable sitting next to Kirsten. He didn't care for him. You could tell that energy was just not there. They then move on to ask Kirsten, how did he feel? Because that left the door open. He then goes on to say, he has nothing to say. I have nothing to say. And so everybody's looking weird, like, okay, what do you mean you have nothing to say? Like, we're asking you how you were in the experience. And he seems a bit angry. Tanika acknowledges that. They're like, what's going on? How you feeling, boo? And he's like, I have nothing to say. So at that point, they're like, well, Ashley, what's going on? And so Ashley's like, well, I don't know. We have not spoken since the show. I have no bitter anger towards him. Nothing ended with us in a really nefarious or like negative way. It just ended and we haven't spoken since. So they ask him about it. He then goes, he's only here because he had to sign a contract. Child. So then Tanika like, well, there's no love lost here. Like, what's going on? She's like, well, Tanika's like, look, ain't nobody, we don't want you to feel uncomfortable if you don't want to be here. He's like, well, if it's fine with everybody else, I don't mind leaving and walking out. When I tell you, ZADIA said bye. And we all felt the same way. He gets up and stomps off like somebody that stole his bike. And he walks out to the back and, production tries to stop him and says, no, you might want to stay and get a chance to tell your story. He's like, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. There's nothing I need to defend myself on. Sir, wasn't nobody even coming at you? They were going to open up into whether or not you and this lady worked out and what maybe you think were the hangups of the situation. We don't really have that much of extreme negative opinion of Kirsten, except for the fact that we kind of thought towards the end he was a bit insincere. But we never had him like verbally or disrespect Ashley or have some huge moment. So as a grown man, you don't know how to articulate yourself. This is when I say I really do be wondering where they got these men from. And also, whenever you hear people say stuff about, we oftentimes hear these, if a woman's over a certain age, why is she single? There's got to be something wrong. It be something wrong with some of these men that be over a certain age too. And you be wondering like, oh, he's attractive. Why hasn't he met anybody or whatever? Girl, it's because the insane asylum don't always let these people out after 5. So when I tell you good riddance to you and them tight jeans and them Jordans, I couldn't have been happier for Ashley to not end up in this situation. And based on what happened next, I'm happy she's not with Donald either. And so Kirsten Hunt stomped out, honey, and his little dramatic exit as the world turns, and we get back into the living room. Y'all can't tell me that's not set up like the room store. Anyway, we get back into the living room and we start having a conversation about Ashley and Donald because, oh boy, is a thing of the past. And we start talking about why they worked, but also why they didn't work. They then start to address Velveteen about why she felt the need to, implicate so much or really just have this very negative impact early on with her and Ashley, not getting along. Now, I want to go back to a moment, if you check out on the screen, I want to go back to a moment when they were having conversation about Ashley and just her experience. Did y'all notice, and it's on the screen if you didn't, but did y'all notice how when they got to the part where Ashley and Donald initially had their communication issue and Ashley said that if it wasn't something that they could fix, that she would have to make a different choice? And the friends at this moment, when they're in the reunion months later, she's waving bye to the screen. And I'm thinking to myself, you really are bitter, mama. You really are thirsty and want him. It was just so disturbing to see her waving by. Like, if you had to go, you had to go. Girl, this is 3 months down the line and you still harboring this issue towards this woman. So I thought it was weird that when they finally spoke with her outside the picture that we saw on screen, she then goes to say that she doesn't have a problem with this Ashley. And if this Ashley had shown up in the process, she would have approached it differently. You wouldn't have, girl, because you want him. Or y'all was sleeping together and he don't want you as more than a friend. Because that's not friendship energy. It's not brotherly energy either. It's very much giving, I can't have him, or he only sees me as a friend. So I'm going to park it right here and hate every woman he ever dates until he decides to wear down and want me. Shout out to Blair Underwood and his new wife. I just want to say, because honey, let me tell you something. Let's get into it. I don't know about everybody else, and I'm not a person that doesn't believe you can't have platonic friends who happen to be of the opposite sex, but you have to be very leery of that scenario when you meet a man that has that, because some of these people are waiting in the wings, regardless of gender, for the day that y'all fall apart and have no problem pushing you along in that situation. And they manipulate the fact that that person and them have a close relationship, whether it be male or female, and they always there as a listening ear whenever they got problems. And you could tell that she would be the type that would constantly speak down about Ashley to Donald if they were going through it and he went to her for advice, because she really just wants him. And she's sitting there waiting in the wings, hoping that one day they break up. And let's be clear, those people could also be married. It does not matter if they're married or they're single. If they want that person and they've never chosen them for whatever reason, it never worked out, they be sitting there just waiting and waiting for the day it ends. They may even marry somebody in the interim time and still be waiting for y'all relationship to break up. So just be mindful about these opposite sex friends, honey. So she goes on to say that, had Ashley not approached Donald in that way because she's going to defend her brother and all that. Girl, he ain't 12. We ain't in middle school. Donald was a grown man who can articulate himself and his voice. Now, I do agree with Donald that there are some parts of Ashley that do need to pipe down from time to time, because the way she piped up in the Charisse and ZADIA situation, even when she was trying to defend herself, it'd be too much sometimes. But I will say that, and you have to learn how to address people, because not everybody's going to be aggressive. And he's absolutely right. Had he gotten really defensive with her, it would have seemed like a jump and it would have seemed uncomfortable because it was a man going at a woman. But having your friend show up with a bag to fight, like she gonna go at Ashley in this other way and putting a battery in her back to disrespect your potential woman, is also not okay. So we end on the idea that Ashley and Donald, are just friends at this point. If something more happens, they'll let them know. But essentially, it's not a go. And we couldn't be happier because Ashley deserves better. And Donald, just go ahead and sleep with your friend and get it together, because that's what really wants you. So now we're done with Ashley and the threesome, honey. And now we on to our girl, Charisse. And, she's our bride all dressed in white. And she's on the couch with Mizell and Eric Adams, Maurice, who was her other keeper. And if it's one thing Eric Adams going to do, honey, besides sue the migrant buses companies, he's going to dress down. He was dressed to impress, and I love to see it. Him and Charisse are like a nice little bride and groom on top of a cake. And, Tanika gets right down to the nitty gritty, and she says, did Charisse, in fact, make a move? Because we know that they ended up together at the end of the series. And Charisse says, no, they did not make a move. And Maurice says the same thing. He says, but they did go to Essence Fest, honey. And at first, I was all smiles, and I'm like, yes, I love to see it, because, they grew on me over time. But then I realized Essence Fest is already in New Orleans. So you just mean she took a trip back to the city? But nonetheless, Charisse says she had a really good time. They had stage tickets for everything, honey. Eric Adams shows her nothing but the best with the city of New York's money. And they are really enjoying each other. And I have to say again, just back to what I initially said before when they finally made it together, I do really like them. Charisse was looking for somebody with money, honey. She got her own dough. She's not trying to live below her lifestyle. And she wasn't looking for anybody that really had any young kids. Eric Adams checks the boxes in all of those categories. He's a nice looking man, keeps himself together. They both like luxury items and traveling. And it looks like that's going to be what they end up doing. So, they ask her, if she and him are in fact in love. And, Charisse was very reluctant to claim anybody, honey. So it was very shocking to see Charisse say yes to Tanika on Love. And Eric Adams actually says yes too. So this is very cute, and what we love to see: positive results, people, positive results. See what can happen when you stop clubbing and take the business of the city of New York seriously and do your job. I love to see it. I love that he's got a smile on her face. They ask the other women how they feel about the scenario and the situation. Ashley is genuinely happy for Charisse, and I believe Venetia as well. But Ashley's the most vocal and says she's super happy. Charisse is a firecracker, so she's super happy that somebody was there that was able to deal with all of that. Eric Adams co-signs the firecracker comment, and that she really found love. They love to see it. That's the reason why they're on the show. And we're excited for her. The dynamic of them is very beautiful. It was very positive. Eric Adams actually seems to be really into her. They asked Charisse and him, how can they make sure that this thing persists past them just constantly being in Louisiana together? How can we get her out of Miami and back to the city? And Charisse said, honey, maybe I'm not going back to the city. I said, okay. And they're like, you going to take your 20 plus something business and move it to Louisiana? And she's like, it's possible. Very shocking, especially in this economy, but it's all good. Finally, we slide on down to the other side of the couch, and we dealing with Mr. Old Mizell and his swinging hips, honey, and his excuses for being a mess. And at this point, I just want to point out a couple of things regarding Mizell. Child, so we move on to Mizell, who is dressed in that crumpled blue church suit, looking slick as ever. And again, I have to wonder, where did they get all of these men in the New Orleans public education system? As we know, when we saw this entire dynamic take place, and I do mean the series, there was so many men that worked in the school system. I need somebody from New Orleans to drop down in the comments. How do y'all have this many single men in the public school system? Is this something that we don't know? Why is this the pool that they keep picking from? And why are so many of them single? We had school counselors, we had superintendents. Honey, why are so many of these men, including this high school dean, single in this school system? Something about the ladies in New Orleans. I feel like somebody from the parish let us know what's going on. So they start having a conversation about how Mizell played too slick, and that's ultimately what left him without any type of situation. And in fact, that when he was interested in Sharice, he hit up Renisha later on that night. And that is really what caused the problem, because he was interested in her as well, but the way he handled it wasn't appropriate. Venetia goes on to explain, like, he texted her that night. He texted her about possibly going out, and it ended up that he was texting her up until the morning time in conversation. But he never said anything to Sharice, and he never ended the situation with Sharice once he thought that he might be interested in her more. And they asked him, why did you go about it this way? Because that's what ultimately caused the rift. It wasn't that you would be interested in, dating somebody else on the show, and that was fine. But it was the fact that you went about it in a way. He's like, well, I thought I was trying to be as truthful as possible up front. And, I think I maybe handled it wrong, but I wasn't trying to, come across as slick. He tries to get into this conversation about how he wasn't hiding it. Honey, when I tell you, if Anisha could have had her phone on stage, she was going to show all the receipts. So he goes on to say that, so she goes on to say, like, you kept, hitting me up and you were asking me to go out on a date. And ultimately, that's why I told Sharice. And I can appreciate this. And this is what's important when we hear constantly the phrase about girls, girl. This is what you're supposed to do. Venetia immediately went to Sharice and let her know right away, Mizell wants to go out and he's interested and he's texting me and this is what's happening. Letting a woman know that up front, especially when you're in close quarters with her, is so important. And ZADIA even points out that, hey, you could have just been a man about it and said what you wanted to say. And really what you're mad about is the fact that you got caught. Because if you had been able to, in the real world, you would have been able to do this and get away with it, as so many do, and been juggling these women and they not know what's going on. But because we were all living in the same house, you tried to apply that same practice, that player energy to the situation. And it didn't work out for you, sir. You too old for that. And it's clearly showing that you're slipping. So they basically tell him again, he could have just avoided this by being more truthful and honest. He then tries to agree because at this point, he doesn't really have a fight to keep going on with. And ultimately, he says that even if this situation doesn't work out, he knows that he's going to find his person. And Sharice chimes in and says, well, I hope you do. Because you're the oldest of your brothers and you're the only one still single. Honey, when I say she slit his throat before any blood could really spill out, I was devastated. Ultimately, we learned nothing from Mizell's situation, except he's the saddest version of a man at that age that does not have his stuff together, and ultimately is a guy who really is trying too hard to stay in the game when he should have left the club a long time ago. Okay, so we are back, and it is on to Venetia and the tale of the two Jabaris, honey. Tabari, and Jabari, honey. And so we are having a conversation about her with Mr. Milk Dud and Tigger. And the dynamic, of course, goes through Venetia's entire time, yada, 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 how she dated, who she met, da, da, da. And we talk about her initial relationship with Jabari, aka Mr. Milk Dud, honey. And her and Mr. Milk Dud had a very promising situation. They had got along very great. We remember they matched like two peas in a pod, honey. Kids in college. He goes to Houston all the time. She comes down to Louisiana. Ain't nothing but a thing. They get along in a lot of different ways, but the dynamic in which they do not connect, and ultimately where Venetia thought that there would be an issue, is their lifestyles. So as we know, Venetia's an entrepreneur. I believe she owns 2 different salons, and she also, I believe, is also doing some type of real estate thing coming up. And Jabari is a traditionalist in both his sense in relationships, but really in his job situation. And not that you can't be an entrepreneur dating somebody who's a traditionalist, because, honey, that works out very well. But in this instance, it may not. He is very much used to getting his check, getting off at 5, going home, and being with his lady. And Venetia has no problem with that, except her lifestyle does not dictate that. She's an entrepreneur. She's a part of her chamber of commerce. She does events and different things like that that help to bring in money. And she also goes to support other entrepreneurs in their businesses and openings and functions and all that. Honey, check the Instagram. I don't have time to run it down. But the point is, all of that is not conducive with someone who's like, hey, I need my spouse home by a certain time and us being in the house by a certain time. So there was just a lot that did not mix and mingle. And they start to talk to Jabari about the things that did not make up for that. And he says that his concern also was that because she does so much and in the entrepreneurship space, and she is the boss in a lot of areas, would she know how to turn that down when she got home? And this is something that a lot of people fear, specifically men, but women also face this because you ain't finna run me. So I don't care who you speak to at work. When you get home, honey, you ain't finna talk to me like I'm one of your employees. But it is something that a lot of men worry about when a woman is in charge, if she's going to be able to slide more into her feminine side and her softer side when she gets home, when you have to kind of be a type A personality at work. And so his concern is that Venetia wouldn't have known how to completely do that. She then chimes in to say, I do know how to do that. I understand his fear, but that wasn't going to be a concern. I wasn't like that in prior relationships, and I'm not like that now. And I definitely don't get the vibe from her that she was that way. I do think she knew how to turn it off. A lot of women are waiting to turn that off and sort of be in a relaxed mode when they get home. But I understood his concern on that. They also addressed the fact that her lifestyle is not traditional as much. Like, she works late at night, she's up late at night. Understandable, because I do feel like when you are entrepreneur, and Venetia also has three girls, and one of them is still very young, you probably get off of work and then you're with your kids, and then at that point, once it's quiet in the house, you can actually start to work and do anything. That could be 12, 1, 2 a.m. in the morning, and you got to start that entire thing over again. And I think that that's been her life for a long time, and she's used to that pattern. And I have to say, this is kind of where I understand it, but I also worry about where it leaves her in the dating pool when she does meet a quality individual. And not so much on the traditionalism side of things, but somebody who does understand her lifestyle, but maybe there are things that have to adjust. And I do think on her end, regardless of if it's Tabari, Jabari, Shafari, whatever, Safari, we need to think about, when you're a type A person, when you are an in charge person, or you're an entrepreneur who has a lot of irons in the fire, how do you adjust your lifestyle to fit a relationship? Because some things are going to have to be different. Maybe you have to go to day events versus some of the night events. Maybe you can't smoke hookah 4 nights of the week with your girlfriends. And I feel like sometimes this may also be an issue because Venetia was a younger mom and she had 3 girls. And so a lot of that, her being a good mother and being there for her kids meant that she didn't get to have such a life outside. And this is sometimes people always talk about the benefits of having kids when you're young. But one of the downsides sometimes is that when you are very young and you have kids young, you don't get to live your younger life. And so a lot of the things that you would get out your system, like going to the club, hanging out, all that kind of stuff, you don't get to do that because you're at home with your children. So when you get to 40 or 45 and your kids are finally out the house, now you want to go out and party. But everybody that already did that, like, look, I'm on the other side. I want to be at home on my couch at, 8 p.m. So I think there is something to that dynamic that has to be looked at as she's going further in the dating world. And maybe in some of the ways that she's adjusting or does adjust for the relationship, whoever she ends up with can do that. Tabari goes on to say that, he is used to the traditional situation. They ask him whether or not that means that he wants a traditional woman in all of the ways. Like, would he have to run everything in his household? I feel like this was a play semantically on things that kind of seemed like it was going too far, where the women were chiming in too much while he was trying to explain. I don't think he was giving us Neanderthal traditional vibes. I didn't get that from when he was talking to Venetia. Up until the moment that their lifestyles were different, he never gave chauvinistic. And it also shows that when they started during the Tabari segment, that Jabari was still a very cool person that Venetia would be cool with, whether they were dating or not. And she said that in the segment. So everything about that didn't give that he was that guy, but it did give that he wouldn't have been okay with a couple of nights a week. And, that's something that sometimes can't be fixed and what will make you kind of fall apart. But they're still cool. He has found a new lady in his life. And let's get on to Tigger in his white suit. Now, despite the fact that he has worn them braided suspenders that look like macrame, I was more than confused and in the same box with Tabari, aka Tigger, as to why him and Venetia did not work. And I wanted to know more too. So I'm glad we had this segment to clear it up, because I was a little bit confused as to how much he did or did not communicate. And so I'm glad that we got a chance to sit down and have this conversation. Although I have to say that it feels like Tabari wasn't really taking a full acceptance of when he wasn't actively communicating. So they talked to Venetia about how and why her and Tabari didn't work out, honey. And Tigger and all these faces, his changes, all these constant drama, it makes me wonder, honey, why are you single? I was rooting for you, Tabari. And so he's sitting there confused in his pale white blue suit, and he's having this conversation about how he did not understand why they ended the way that they did. He feels like even if they didn't end on good terms, he's not sure as to why, he felt like his character was maligned. I did not get that from the last episode. Y'all let me know. I didn't see her talking down on this man or disrespecting him in any capacity. The one interview that I saw that she did prior to the season ending, she didn't even say anything negative about him. She actually gave him a lot of kudos, which is what made me change my mind about taking him seriously, because before that he was acting like Ronald McDonald, and it wasn't making me take him serious. So I feel like Venetia really spoke highly of him in her off interviews. But they had this conversation about how Tabari simply did not communicate. Whether or not he wanted to be in her space and in her world, he did not talk to her in between their dates. And it would be times that would be super lengthy. She also compares him and Jabari co-signs at least that him and Venetia's communication was A1. They FaceTimed each other, they texted on the phone, they talked on a regular basis. She said that they still talk now. I wonder what Jabari and women think about that. But sideways, back to Tabari, she says that her and Tigger didn't have the same energy. He didn't talk to her for days on end, 24 to 48 hours. There was very sparse communication. He says he doesn't feel like it was, and he feels like it. Then he says, like, well, it kind of was. Make up your mind, sir, because at first you're making us to feel like, you out here lost in the wilderness, and I'm feeling like we done got through some of these trees and realized that you don't know how to use the send button on your phone to just say hello, hi, how you doing, what's going on with your day? Oh, I heard about that happened last week. How do you feel about this? It sounds like he just was not communicating, and he's not getting that. He then goes on to say that one of the reasons that he pulled back from communication is because Venetia is very closed off, not necessarily when it comes to texting, but maybe on a physical level, she can be a little shut off, and that energy made him pull back a bit. And that's a valid reason to say, like, hey, if you're not giving me a full openness of you, that is a problem. And Venetia says that she does feel like she can be a bit, like reserved in her physicality. Like, despite liking somebody that, she's not this woman that's letting you hug up all on her or, like kiss on her and all that kind of stuff. And she admits that that's the case, but also it has to do with how open you are. And the fact that she wasn't getting communication, and she expressed to him more than once that, hey, I need you to text more. I need you to talk more. I need you to communicate just outside of our dates. And that wasn't changing. It made her feel like she didn't want to be open in that other way. And I will say that women have to feel safe and comfortable to have a vulnerability with any person. And that's really just not women. That's anybody. The best interviews that we watch, the best dynamics that we see in relationships, the person feels safe because they feel like they can be vulnerable in that space. And when you're not giving me enough conversation to even last or keep me interested the next day, you ain't gonna really have nothing from me. Tigger can't seem to get that. He keep doing the different clown faces. And at this point, we tired of this conversation. They didn't work. Communication wasn't there. Jabari and Venetia still talk, and they could hang out even if they wanted to. He said, yeah, we still cool. Her and Tabari haven't talked since the day that ended. He's devastated. Venetia is not. She's looking to find love going forward, but it just won't be with him.
Yeah.
Now it's time to sit down with the ladies and their besties. As you know, somewhere along the way, we had the ladies show up with their friends. And, we had Liz for Venetia. We had LJ come in with Sharice. We had Camille come in with ZADIA. And we had Stormy come in with Ashley. And so they want to kind of go over some of the dynamics in the house that occurred when the friends were visiting. And of course, the friends met the keepers at the time and were giving their advice. So first up, we have ZADIA and Camille. And Camille basically says that they go over the segment where she was sitting down interviewing Cameron for the job. And Camille was being Camille, but she was also asking him really good upfront questions. And during that point, he did actually mention that he didn't know if he had the time to sort of be in a relationship with anybody right now because of all the things he had going on. And Camille clocked that during their discussion. And when he left, she did mention to ZADIA, like, hey, this could be a red flag for you. because of the situation. So flashback me on the couch now, and Camilla's like, basically, exactly why they breaking up is exactly why I asked her to pay attention to. She wasn't really hating. She really did, say something that was valid in the sense that she was bringing up the fact that this man may not have the time. And it's not a shade situation. Like, it just is something that could possibly occur because he may not be able to give you what you need. And ZADIA refused to listen. Very much like how she refused to listen on that couch when that man came by that house on that special Sunday to tell her, like, look, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe you need to see other people. And she turned it into, oh, you want to break up? So it's one of those things that it was nice to see that Camille also expressed the exact same thing that many of us were expressing while watching this episode. Drop down in the comments if this was you, about how ZADIA refused to listen to what he was saying and act accordingly based off of that, and just wanted to see what she wanted to see and go for what she wanted, whether or not she knew that this man had the time to do what she needed to do. Vernisha also chimes in to let them know that, of all the men that were there, Cameron really was one of the sweetest ones in terms of the fact that he really checked in on everybody. She said that when they went out for dates or group dates, whatever, he always checked in to make sure everybody was good and got home safe. He was very much a hospitable person. I would expect nothing less from people either living in New Orleans or from New Orleans, because they are really some of the best folks, honestly. And really checking in on you to see if everybody was good, made it home safely, that the women were having a good time. So she was on the fence, being a resident bestie of being a resident bestie of ZADIA, as to whether or not she was for or against him. Like, she saw what ZADIA was going through with him, but she also appreciated how much of a gentleman he was. I mean, everybody's telling you, you're just not refusing to see it. ZADIA goes on to say that she understands what Camille is saying, honey, and she's going to figure out that situation. I want to know why ZADIA didn't help Camille with the makeup in her part on that wig. But because then you really say you're my best friend if you're going to let me go out with my lace front. Anyway, I feel like sometimes ZADIA could be hard-headed, and a lot of the dynamic of her and Cam being in this situation is on her end as well. Child, then let's move on to Ashley and Stormy. Now, so let's talk about the whirlwind that was the Ashley, Stormy, Kirsten drama. So as we know, they had the ladies meet their friend's man, and Stormy showed up to Ashley's date, and she showed up, being a bad bee that she is, dressed fantastically. Ashley was a little bit more casual, so was Kirsten. And they ended up having a conversation, sitting down, talking for a little bit as they were discussing things. It was clear that Kirsten was, thought that, Stormy was attractive, but Stormy did not engage that behavior with him. She sort of was just being talkative. They were having a little funny, jokey joke. And then he mentioned he had some siblings that were single, and they started having a conversation about that. Now, I want to say that I understand Ashley's anger a little bit, because she was locked out a bit in the conversation after a while. And even though Stormy was never like flirting with Kirsten back and forth, the fact that you saw that your friend wasn't really engaging and you were there for a reason, at least from us, optically seemed inappropriate. However, we do know, and I will post it up here somewhere in the video, but we do know that Stormy addressed this later on offline a couple weeks back about how she did in fact ask Kirsten a bunch of questions and production cut it out. She also stated that her and Ashley's dynamic was not as it seemed. Let me get into that in a minute. Now, Ashley then goes on to talk to us about how she felt disrespected about the fact that, Stormy showed up the way that she did. She, it states that she doesn't feel, like she has any insecurity in that way, but there's certain ways she would never show up to a situation. She would never show up dressed like, the cousin from Soul Food and different things like that. And saying that, she thought, I would never show up and not engage or make it not about my friend. And I understand where Ashley is coming from. She's extra with the communication and the animation. And I have to say, people were understanding where she was coming from, but some of her communication levels, she, like we said from the beginning, she has to work on. Very expressive, seems to still be upset about the situation. And honestly, the women on the other couch were very shocked. If you notice, Charisse, Camille, ZADIA's body language and their faces were like, girl, you doing too much. And finally, ZADIA chimes in and says what needs to be said. And I wish she would keep the sound advice for her own self. But she basically said, like, look, the fact that you are pissed off about the situation, you have your right to feel valid. However, you need to learn how to express that in the moment, or at least a day or two after, because what Stormy points out is that when they talked after, Ashley never expressed to her that she was upset about the way that the meetup went. So why are you now 3 months later still on this road when you never pulled over the car the first time and tell me that you didn't like the situation and what was going on and yada yada yada. And I have to say, I love the advice that Zadia gave to Ashley about presenting how you feel and not holding back so that you don't blow up on somebody else later. But I wasn't feeling the insecurities that Ashley tried to jump over. Let's talk about the insecurity part. So what I'm talking about is the fact that Ashley tries to make it seem like, I'm secure in who I am and I have no problem with the woman being beautiful, but there's certain ways I wouldn't show up. And it really took me back to the whole birthday debacle that went on last year sometime, where that girl went to her friend's birthday party and she was dressed in a Mugler suit and the friend was dressed pretty plain. And there was an upset about the friend texting her the next day to tell her that she didn't like the fact that she dressed up because she was trying to outdress her. And this is the issue that a lot of women hold on to, maybe that aren't as stylish. But my thing is, you're supposed to know your friend. So you know your friend extra. I don't feel no sort of way about my friends if I'm dressed a certain way and I love what I have on and they show up in a ball gown or whatever. I know my friend Cinderella. I didn't know this girl for 10 years, 20 years. We done been friends this long. I know my friend is extra. I know she gonna show up in a beaded, bedazzled, whatever. And that's not gonna make me feel no certain way. I feel like a lot of women use that excuse to say like they have no problem with it when they really do have a problem with it. And again, it's maybe not tapping into finding your own personal style. So you're upset with the friend that is stylish or the friend that is a little bit extra. Like I got the friend that's gonna put on the tiara at the birthday party, but I knew that was who she was 15 years ago. That doesn't mean that that's not my ace boom. That doesn't mean that we still ain't tight as ever. That doesn't mean that we're not besties. It means that I know my friend. If all the other places in my life she shows up as a solid person, if she want to dress like a solid gold dancer one of them days, I can't get into it. And I feel like I understand a little bit about what Ashley was saying about appropriateness, but Stormy didn't show up in a bikini to the date. She showed up in a nice little dress with a little jacket and her little, share wig. But that's who she is. She's a DJ. She DJs all over the world. That's her environment. And Stormy, to what we ended up finding out later, wasn't really completely told where she was going. And let's also point out the fact that Stormy and Ashley ain't really that tight. And Stormy basically unearthed that after the show aired, and she put out that, hey, and we weren't really that close to be, we're not super close like that. I do know Ashley from the first season. We don't hang out like that. It's not this super tight relationship. It really isn't Camille and Zadia. And you could tell that from the body language when she walked into the house. It wasn't Liz and Venetia. It was very much like, hey girl, I haven't seen you in a while, and they needed somebody from season 1. So making it seem like this was your best friend and she just did not show up for you in that moment, especially when we know that production could do the trickery and did not show the questions that she did ask Kirsten. I feel like they did try to play Stormy in that way to just have this dynamic of friends making up and getting back together because they didn't get anything from Kirsten in his segment, that they tried to play this out. And I thought it was very, very lame to make that lady look like she was out there trying to be with that man when she really wasn't. Didn't nobody want Ike Turner ass. So I'm glad that they tried to seal or heal this up at the end. But honestly, it felt a little bit of a fakery because, like Stormy said, we're not even super close like that. We were cool. I was not trying to, flirt and get with this man. I hate that they didn't show the whole segment and try to play Stormy in a bad light because she always seemed like she had positive energy from season 1. Child, let's get to Zadia and, this weirdo with the mop top and the no limit chain. So, I already hated Cameron's style from day 1. I cannot take that afro wig that he is wearing, honey. It looks fake. I don't know. Y'all tell me. I told y'all that in the very first episode. It was already a questionable thing. And more stuff keep getting into his hair. Even if you wear your hair wild, even if you wear your hair in locks or whatever, you could still take out the lint. When I tell you every time there's pieces of balls or things anywhere, like you still have to groom it, sir. Even if it's growing on your hair, you still have to keep it together. Let's move on from MOPTOP. So Zadia and him are now sitting next to each other, and Cameron comes out and they start in right away like, hey, why didn't this work? Where are y'all now? They're not in a place of where they are together. So Cameron said that basically, he feels like he was very open in the very beginning of their situation. After a while, even when he liked her, he realized that you have to make space for the woman in your life. And he was not doing that. He thought that Zadia was a dope person, but he essentially just didn't have the time to date her. He was trying to do certain things in his life and his business, exactly what he told Camille. And that ultimately it just didn't mesh well together. And essentially, he says that, he tried to express that the best that he could. And he is upset that it didn't work and disappointed because he genuinely did like her and getting to know her. Now, I've said from the beginning that I think that their relationship is very much to blame on both ends because ZADIA refused to accept that. Let's get into that part first. ZADIA refused to accept that if a man is constantly telling you that he does not have the time and he is not ready, you have to accept that and choose your own self, like Venetia did. But ZADIA kept putting the onus on him to be the one to break it off, even though he was telling her that he was not ready. And that is something that's not fair to then come back and say, you blindsided me. He really didn't, though, because he kept telling you over and over and over again, I don't have the time. And you did not care about that part. As long as he kept saying, well, I'll keep going along, but I don't know that this is going to work out. He told her several times that he didn't mind if she dated other people. And she did not, she kept ignoring all of those things because she wanted what she wanted. Now, on the other end, Cameron is full of it because, sir, you could have dropped out at any time. You could have not been on the show if you was not ready to love. You could have assessed your situation halfway through the show, and you did because you came to the house on that random Sunday, decided to have to sit down talk with her. At that point, you should have said, hey, not only do I not think I don't have the time, but I cannot continue on this journey. It has been a blessing to get to know you, and I got to let you be so that you can meet somebody else who is right for you. And you never stepped out of this situation. You kept dragging your own self along throughout this entire thing. You're not a victim. He goes on to say that he now understands the dynamic of why you need to try to date somebody. All of a sudden, Venetia interrupts and lets him know, we're not finna play that game. While you did express your reservations, you continued on in this battle cry the entire time. And you ultimately dragged ZADIA along for the ride when you could have also ended the situation. She goes on to say that as an entrepreneur who owns multiple businesses and has children, she absolutely understands the time commitment and the issue. But when she said she was ready for love, she meant that she was ready for love, even if she was doing it with clenched fists. And she says that you can't use that being a reason as to why you can't be in a relationship. You're going to almost ultimately always be busy. And it's just one of those things that you're going to have to, like, determine in your dynamic, as we talked about with Venetia, about how much you want to balance these things out. Ultimately, Cam goes on to say that, he tried the hardest he could. He did communicate effectively with her. He even bought a gift for her. Honey, he proceeds to bring out these Walmart frames with that picture that he took of her on that free ass date that they had at the end of the season. All the pictures of ZADIA he has framed up. And he says that he really does genuinely care about her. But even now, he's sacrificing time because he's supposed to be hiring people for his back end office. And instead, he's here on his couch having this conversation again. It was very unnecessary. It was super rude. And ultimately, ZADIA is like, look, don't do me no favors. You can go ahead and go with the dynamic. And, he heads on out, walks on out, a little smirk on his face. And that is what gave me ultimate loser energy. They both wasted each other's time. And it is sad to see that dynamic end so badly because they obviously had chemistry in the very beginning. But both of them not willing to take the brave steps to say we need to end this situation is what ended them in the sad place that they in right now. Child, in this last segment of the night, the visual interpretation for how I feel like this devil in a blue dress, in an ice blue dress, Miss Tamika, is responsible for all of the foolishness that we had to endure throughout the season, honey. This lady really do enjoy chaos. She is really low-key the Joker. So essentially, we end the segment on the night where they want to check one more time around the room to see who's good and what's what. They head over to Ashley and Don, and they say, they're young, they're, love is in the air, the moon is out. Y'all should still connect and have a good time. Ashley says they're still going to try to see if they can get something going, and Don says you never know. They ultimately try to encourage her and Don that maybe the tension between them is sexual and they need to go ahead and get it out. Ashley does this dramatic thing where she pulls Don off stage to let's go do it. And they, shortly part. And when they get into that, they turn around to Tamika and start asking her, can she give a once around in the situation and talk to each woman about how their dynamic went and how the dates went. They talk to Charisse and Maurice, and they ultimately say that they obviously are the only ones that found love or relationship and that they're going to continue to make it work. Maurice is very vocal in these moments, and it really is beautiful to see. He seems to be as actively involved as Charisse. It's not her talking for them. He's also speaking up, and it really is a beautiful thing to see him be able to express that he's happy with the choice that he made. He said that him and Charisse started off a bit bumpy in terms of figuring themselves out, but once they did, it really is a good thing. They seem grown, good, and hopefully this does work out. I'm really rooting for him and Charisse. They go on to talk to ZADIA and Venetia, and Tamika says she has one last surprise. And ZADIA is like, okay. And when I tell you Venetia looked angry as hell, like, girl, the way you have picked these men, don't you dare try to spring nobody else on us. Matchmaking not be your thing, mama. But Tanika clearly tries to reiterate to us her resume, of which I have yet to confirm, y'all, that Tamika is one of the best matchmakers out there, and she has tons of successful couples. And does she have any advice? She says to Ashley that she, as her and Don walk back on the stage from their, fake quickie, that she feels like Ashley taught her a lot about, learning how to choose yourself and her bravery and doing that this season, because we know in the past she hasn't always done that, and it's ended her in a situation where she's in bad relationships where she's caring more about the other person's feelings than her own. She talks about ZADIA being very open. I definitely disagree. I feel like ZADIA was super closed off to almost all of the men besides Cameron when she was in the situation, which ended her up on the couch with that man leaving to go hire people in with HR and not sitting next to her. So I do not think ZADIA was open to she was open to the process, but she wasn't opening herself up to the other dates. She kept shutting every man down and comparing him to Cameron when she should have been more open, and she probably wouldn't be sitting on this couch alone. She goes over to Venetia and says that Venetia will not settle anytime. And that's something that she appreciates and admires about her, that she settled in the past and she doesn't want to make that mistake. And I do admire that element of Venetia, but I do want Venetia to learn to be a bit more open to the idea that it's not always settling to take in consideration that when a person comes into your life, you are going to have to learn how to adjust. She talks about Maurice and Charisse and how she really loves where their dynamic is going. And as long as they keep the communication lines open and focus on the way ahead in a positive way, they can make it work. We wrap up this show. The season has ended. I have to personally say, I really love this iteration of Ready to Love. I like the dynamic that we slowed it down. We cut half them damn people off the stage. We focus on a few folks and them having random dates and them bonding with each other, but also getting a chance to really go out on dates. I wish they would stop messing with the editing so much so we could see more of the dates and the dynamics and flows of it. But I really like this version of it. I would love to see one with all men. I hope that that's what they're working on next. And we know that the new season of Ready to Love is going to premiere next week. So let me know what y'all thought of the season in these comments. Let me know what y'all thought about the reunion. What y'all talking about Ike Turner's hat. Let me know what y'all think about Charisse and Maurice. And I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.